in the world are still mounting, aren't they? Steadily, very steadily. The only tension I feel, brothers and sisters, is that the tension of having to face very shortly the blue eyes of divinity. That's going to be an awe-inspiring occasion for all of us. You know, brothers and sisters, the signs of the times are so evident. It is so evident. You know about, of course, the Ukraine just steams on. Putin is not backing off 1 inch. Matter of fact, he's doing the very opposite. He's putting more and more pressure upon that country, and there is less and less criticism coming of it. But you know what happened just recently? They had a vote in the European Union, didn't they? To test the consensus of the member states as to what they thought about the Union. Well, brothers and sisters, as was expected, the majority felt that they ought to continue as they are, that they want to be members of the Union of Europe, of course, for economic reasons. But what absolutely startled everybody was the dramatic increase of the votes of the extreme right-wing parties. That frightened the living daylights out of a lot of people. There was a surprising rise in that vote, brothers and sisters, for the extreme right, especially, guess what, in France. Especially in France. And what were their policies? What are the policies of the extreme right? Immigration for one. They don't want any more migrants into Europe. One can understand that. And the other policy, brothers and sisters, is this. They are violently opposed to the Jews. They are violent anti-Semites. Many of them want the days of Hitler back again. And you know, brothers and sisters, you can have this sign or that sign, but I'm saying this. As soon as we see the pendulum starting to swing, and it's swinging now, where Israel becomes isolated in this world, brothers and sisters, then we know that the stealthy advent of the King of Israel is on the eve of becoming a fact. There's no way that Yahweh will delay any longer when that happens. And we're beginning to see that now. The Pope's just visited Jordan, spoke to Christians and Muslims in Jordan, went across to Jerusalem and met with the Jewish people there, went to the Wailing Wall, went to the Holocaust Museum. Showed a great piety, didn't he, all about those things. Then he's invited both Netanyahu and the delegation from the Gaza Strip people and the Arabs to come to the Vatican to speak to him about these issues. And guess what will happen? Israel will prove intractable, won't they? They won't give an inch of that land, will they? And you will see, brothers and sisters, that slowly and surely, if not slowly, quickly, the world opinion will come, as I've said all along. The obvious solution to the world's problems must be clearly obvious. What do we do with 6 million Jews who are holding up the column of progress towards peace? It's expedient that that crowd go. And you can see that building up everywhere. It's so plain. And when that happens, brothers and sisters, there's no way there's going to be much more delay. Because we know what Yahweh's purpose is. His purpose is to snatch those people out of that dilemma in a flash, brothers and sisters, if it be at the last minute. But it's building up now, and you can see it happening, and we're finding the tensions are growing all over the world, not only in Europe, right up in Southeast Asia. And we're in Southeast Asia. There's a half a dozen countries in Southeast Asia are terribly upset about the Chinese, who go tow their drilling machines into people's waters and drill in the international waters of that country. Lay claim to islands that really don't belong to them, stretching out their economic arm everywhere and trying to strangle people up to the benefit of China. And Southeast Asia is, brothers and sisters, very tense about this at the moment. 1.2 billion people in China. They're a force to be reckoned with, brothers and sisters. Trouble is everywhere. But it speaks of a glorious day. An absolutely glorious day. And we can't hardly wait for that day, brothers and sisters, and it'll be an awe-inspiring occasion. And I know all of you, with myself, we want to be in that kingdom. We really want to see these things happen, and we want to see a better world. We want to see a greater king. We want to see the end of all these corrupt governments and stupid politicians who wouldn't know what day of the week it was. We want to see a man in supreme control who's got divine wisdom and all power in heaven and in earth put in his hand. That's what we want to see. And we'll be very happy, brothers and sisters, all of us, I'm sure, to take the meanest place in that kingdom just to see it happen and to be part of that wonderful day. I think it was a very, very exciting time in history, brothers and sisters, and we ought to be paying attention to what we're doing. We ought to be paying attention. And I'm sure, brothers and sisters, you feel the same. Well, it's of course, Zechariah, isn't it? Now, we've had a look at these divisions. We want to see them again tonight. We've dealt with those first 7 verses, the decisive battle for Jerusalem. Then we come down to verse 8 and 11, the topographical changes of the land, which of course will be part of our subject tonight. The enemies of Israel are overthrown, verses 12 to 15. The great national pilgrimage to Jerusalem will take place, of course, when the nations go up from year to year to worship the King, Yahweh of armies. And then, of course, finally, Yahweh will pervade the whole earth. Now, tonight's subject, brothers and sisters, is that section. We want to be dealing with the topographical changes of the land and the enemies of Israel overthrown. So let's take it up from verse 8, okay? And there we read, and it shall be in that day. Remember what we said about that? Look at all these times that appears. All over these last 3 chapters in Zechariah. It's all over the place from 12, 13 and 14. You read it everywhere. In that day. Well, what's going to happen in that day? Living waters shall go out from Jerusalem. Living waters shall go out from Jerusalem. You know, brothers and sisters, that term, living there, is rendered in the 19th chapter of Numbers, where we deal with the red heifer. Remember the red heifer we talked about? A fountain will be opened for sin and uncleanness in that city in Zechariah 13, when Jesus Christ comes. He will open up a fountain of living water for sin and for uncleanness. Well, that's the term that was used when the priest had to go out with the ashes of the red heifer and to mix that with running water, says Numbers 19 and verse 17. In the Hebrew, living water. It's water on the go, brothers and sisters, sparkling clear, running water. And what was that for? That was to take away from the taint from their bodies of the contact with a person dying, a human being dying. Not just an animal, a dead body of an animal. The red heifer wasn't for that. It was when you come in contact with mortality in action, in another person who died near you, or a saddle that he'd ridden on a horse that you're going to ride, or a tent you were in, anywhere in proximity to him or her, when they died, you were immediately unclean, brothers and sisters. Immediately unclean. When Israel went to war, they were all out there in the field. They were dead bodies everywhere. When they came back, the whole nation the whole army went through that process. And the first occasion ever known of its use in the Bible was the death of their leaders, Miriam and the high priest Aaron. Straight the next chapter. So here's the great high priest. Even him, brothers and sisters, made the nation unclean when he died. They'd all have to go through that process because they're all involved with him. And we're here tonight because we've been released from that. The living waters, brothers and sisters, that have been sprinkled upon us have been sprinkled by our high priest who died to do that. His death didn't make us unclean. His death, brothers and sisters, and resurrection is going to result in our bodies being made perfect. It's exactly the opposite. So we got these statements, haven't we, about the Lord Jesus Christ, living waters. Now, Zechariah says this is going to happen in Jerusalem. So we read in the prophecy of Ezekiel, afterwards he brought me again unto the door of the house, and behold, waters issued out from under the threshold of the house eastward, for the forefront of the house stood toward the east, and the waters came down from under the right side of the house at the south side of the altar. Then brought he me out by the way of the gate northward, and led me about the way without to the utter gate, by the way that looketh eastward. And behold, there ran out waters on the right side. And when the man that had the line in his hand went forth eastward, he measured 1,000 cubits, and he brought me through the waters. The waters were to the ankles. Again he measured 1,000 and brought me through the waters, and the waters were to the knees. Again he measured 1,000 and brought me through the waters, and the waters were to the loins or the thighs. Afterwards he measured 1,000, and it was a river that I could not pass over, for the waters were risen, waters to a river that could not be passed over. And he said to me, Son of man, have you seen this? Then he brought me and caused me to return to the brink of the river. And when I had returned, behold, at the bank of the river were very many trees, on the one side and on the other. Then said he unto me, These waters issues out toward the east country, and they go down to the desert, and go into the sea, which being brought forth into the sea, the waters shall be healed. So Ezekiel has shown this remarkable vision, brothers and sisters, by this man of brass that he met earlier in the prophecy, and was invited to take a tour of that temple and to watch him build it. He built this and he built that. And he said, Son of man, set your heart on all you see and what I do. Until in the end, brothers and sisters, when he came right around to the front of that temple, to the eastern side, when the thing was built before his very eyes in vision, he was taken right into the holy place, most holy place, stood there with that man alongside of him. And he said, the man stood beside me. The man stood next to me, he said, in that most holy place. And the voice of Yahweh said, Son of man, the place of my throne and the place of the soles of my feet. And the man stood alongside of me. And when Yahweh said that, his voice came through that temple, brothers and sisters. Son of man, the place of the soles of my feet. Ezekiel would look at that man, he would know who he was, wouldn't he? He was the representative of Almighty God, standing right alongside of him. And it was this man that's directing his attention to those waters. You know, brothers and sisters, the waters were at various depths, and the distances were not great. You don't generally see a tremendous change like that in such a short distance. Your ankles, then your knees, up to your thighs, and then finally you've got to swim. It's over your head. So there is a gradation, isn't there? There's a gradation of cleanliness that's going to be necessary in entering into that kingdom, isn't it? First thing we do, brothers and sisters, we get into water over our head, don't we? We cannot get near God. In his spiritual temple in the heavens above, with the man sitting alongside of him, we can't get near that until we're baptised. And from there on, brothers and sisters, it's a cleansing of our life, our hands, and especially our hands and feet, as Jesus said to his own disciples when they were talking about baptism and so forth. He said, no need but to wash your hands and your feet. Peter wanted his whole body washed. He said, no, Peter, just your hands and your feet. All of us here tonight, I assume, not everybody I suppose, but most of us here have gone over our head into that water. We can approach, brothers and sisters, but we've got to keep our hands and our feet especially clean, don't we? It's where we go, what we do, and how we act is so important. And so those waters had that significance. Not the only place that talked about those waters. And it shall come to pass in that day that the mountains shall drop down new wine, and the hills shall flow with milk, and all the rivers of Judah shall flow with waters, and a fountain shall come forth of the house of Yahweh, and shall water the valley of the acacias, as the word Shittim means, the valley of the acacias. You know where that was? It was just on the eastern side of the Jordan, where Israel crossed that Jordan. It was there that Yahweh instructed Joshua through Moses what he had to do. It was there that Israel were reminded at that very place how God had turned the tables upon Balaam, the false prophet. And all his prophecies were forced upon him to speak of the blessing of Israel when he desperately wanted to speak about their demise because it would have got him a lot of money. And they were there reminded of all God's work, brothers and sisters, right there. And those waters are going to come down that mountain, and they're going to flow down toward the Jordan Valley into the plain of the Acacias. It's in the region of Sodom and Gomorrah. Very interesting, isn't it? Here's another sort of water, brothers and sisters, isn't it? This is the woman of Samaria. She said, look, you're our father Jacob, she said, who gave us this well when she was sitting there at the well of Shechem. Their father Jacob, she was a Samaritan. She wasn't just unclean, she was desperately unclean. The Jews couldn't stand the sight of them. And here's the Lord telling her, she said, look, you're greater than Jacob, you can give us water. He says, look, you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, give me a drink. You would have asked him and he would have given you living water. And then he went on to reveal to that woman, brothers and sisters, her past history. And the effect upon her was so electric, that she raced off and left her water pot at that well. She'd forgotten all about the reason she came. She was so impressed with this man who told me everything I ever did. And he was promising her, brothers and sisters, living water. Do you know, there is in Shechem, and I've seen it with my own eyes, a well, an incredible well. It's very deep, goes down about 20 or 30 feet. You look down, and you look at this great opening, and you look down there, and the water is actually running. It's like a living stream, a running stream just running past that hole. The hole is about nearly as round as this desk. You look down there and you see the water running along like that, way down there. God, Jesus was to talk to that woman about that living water. And then we read again about this living water. On the last and greatest day of the feast, Jesus stood and said in a loud voice, if anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, streams of living water will flow from within him. That's how we see him, brothers and sisters. And I remember the occasion I looked down that hole and I saw that water running like that in that very spot where Jesus had drawn the attention of that woman to that living water. I couldn't help but think about that. The living water is not coming from us, it's coming from him. He's the source of it, brothers and sisters. He will be the king in Jerusalem. Those waters will flow out from Jerusalem, not just literal waters, there will be of course, but not just literal waters, brothers and sisters, but cleansing waters, refreshing waters, life-giving waters will flow out of that temple. Now when did he say that? He said that on an occasion when he went to Jerusalem to see the Jews. I say see the Jews keep the Feast of Tabernacles because he had no intention of keeping it as they did. That's why he delayed his entry into Jerusalem at that time. Your time is any time that you could go, he said, but my time has not yet come. And he went down in that 7th chapter of John to the Feast of Tabernacles, which this chapter is going to finish with in our next study. The Feast of Tabernacles, when all Israel were gathered around that city. Not now to have a solemn feast like the Passover, not now to gather about the very solemn occasion of the Day of Atonement. This was the picnic day, brothers and sisters. This is when everybody came. And they all came down and cut down the trees, the branches of the trees and palm trees, and Jerusalem was just dotted everywhere. Thousands of them everywhere. It was the most joyous occasion in Israel's 3 great feasts, and we'll go through them in our final study on Zechariah. It was a very, very refreshing and happy time for the people, as all, of course, ecclesial picnics are. And what they did on that day, the Jerusalem, of course, the customs of the Jews on that day are well documented, brothers and sisters. And one of the great festivities that took place on that day was a member of the priestly class would go down to the pool of Siloam, which came down to the pool there, which in the ancient times was known as the King's Garden. Down the bottom of the slope of Mount Zion, which was the city of David, down the bottom of that, there was this pool of water there, which was fed from this tunnel, which was dug by Hezekiah. And those waters, brothers and sisters, represented salvation. With joy shall we draw water from the wells of salvation. Isaiah chapter 12. And those were the words on that day when this vast throng of people, very happy, in a jovial mood and happiness, filling Jerusalem, brothers and sisters, they swelled around that priest as he came back and held aloft this golden bowl. And as he went back holding it aloft so all could see it, the whole concourse of people swelled up with song and sang, "With joy shall we draw waters from the wells of salvation." And all of a sudden, there came a voice over the top of the whole lot of them. When Jesus sought an eminent place, stood up and he says, "He that is thirsty, come here and drink." Can you imagine the drama of that occasion? When the climax of that happy day was to see that priest taking that water to pour it upon the altar from one that is sent, the pool of Siloam, because that's what it means, brothers and sisters. And here this itinerant carpenter, itinerant the country, stands up and says, "If you want drink, come here." And that voice would have been heard everywhere. Everybody had turned around and thought, "Who's that?" And it was the Son of God, brothers and sisters, inviting those people to really have the day when, with joy, we will all say that. With great gladness we will say it. We will draw water from the wells of salvation, living water. You imagine, brothers and sisters, the surge in your body. Young people today feel it today, don't they, in their vitality and their youthfulness. When they get around our age, brothers and sisters, you start to imagine it a bit more dramatically, the tremendous surge of that and what that will mean. Not just strength, not just the ability to run and not faint, to walk and not get tired, as Isaiah says. Not just that, brothers and sisters, but to fully appreciate the truth as you've never appreciated it before, to give all the tensions in your body now directed to one thing alone. When the very surge of that living water will drive out of your being every lustful thought, for every wicked thing that comes in so frequently to our lives will be just absolutely washed away. Just like that, washed out completely. And the whole body vitalised as it's never been vitalised, brothers and sisters. And all the aches and pains and woes of our flesh. And if Brother Bob and Sister Margaret's listening, just think of it, Brother Bob and Sister Margaret, what will happen in that day. What will happen? What a great, tremendous thing it will be when those waters come surging through. With joy shall we draw water from the wells of salvation. Well and truly, of course, that day they'll be rejoicing like they've never ever seen in Israel on any Feast of Tabernacles. You know, when you read these last few verses of Zechariah, the whole thing comes to a tremendous climax here. It really does. And you know what we learn next, brothers and sisters? We learn this. We learned that those waters will go from the former and to the hinder sea. They're going to go to the River Jordan. They're going to go down there into the Jordan Valley, into the Dead Sea. And they're going to go to the other way to the west, into the Mediterranean, as we'll see later on. In summer and winter, it's going to happen. There will be no end of it. That symbol, the symbolic water, it'll be literal water, but it'll be symbolic of something really greater. And it says, and Yahweh shall be king over all the earth. In that day there shall be one Yahweh, and his name one. And the Hebrew word means united. There's going to be one Yahweh, and his name united. And we've got no doubt whatever what that means. I pray for them, John. I pray not for the world, but for them which thou hast given me, for they are thine. And all mine are thine, and thine are mine. And I am glorified in them. And now I am no more in the world, but these are in the world, and I come to thee, Holy Father. Keep through thy own name those whom thou hast given me, that they may be one as we are. That's simple, isn't it? That's a simple explanation. His name one, and of course in that name, brothers and sisters, we'll all be one. He is one, and his name will be one. There's not two there. It's not he's one thing and they're another. It's saying that they're all going to get welded into that. You see, because that surge of immortality, brothers and sisters, it's not going to be unique. It's not going to be, it actually finds only its origin. God only hath immortality, we read in Timothy. He's the only one. There are myriads of angels up there, brothers and sisters. But there's only one that's going to be said, he's got immortality, underived from anyone. Everyone else has derived it from him. And you can see the principle, can't you? As we grow up in life and we try and do our best and try and meditate on the word, pray for forgiveness for the mistakes we make and try and make up for them, try and help our brothers and sisters. We are striving more every day, brothers and sisters, to be more like him. And in the end, Jesus will make the difference up. He will forgive our sins because of the great sacrifice in which we've got our faith. And we will just merge into God. It's not something that we're getting. We just merge into him. That's the point, isn't it? He's one Yahweh, and his name is united. So we unite with him. It's an incredible thing. You see, it's one thing to serve somebody. It's one thing to serve a master or a lord and to get a reward for what you did for him. That's exactly not what this is. It's nothing to do with what this is. We don't get any reward, brothers and sisters, except we become one with him. It's not a question of him saying, well, you've done this because I've said it, and because you did what I said, you're a goody-goody, I'm going to give you eternal life. No. It's because we're striving to be like him morally, that in the end we just merge into him, so that in the 1 Corinthians 15, it goes on to say that God shall be all and in all. Think of that. When all is gone at the end of the millennium, all that offends, all the offences of the world buried beneath the earth, obliterated, brothers and sisters. And there remains nothing upon the earth, nobody upon the earth that's not immortal. God is everything. The whole creation has merged back into him because out of him it came. It's just an enormous concept. It's a concept almost beyond understanding, but it's nonetheless here. His name one, and we are one with him. That's what that means, brothers and sisters. Now, topographical changes. Now, there is a photograph of Jerusalem, right? You see there at the dome of the rock, well, almost straight ahead of that is the Garden of Gethsemane, that group of trees, and right up on top there is the Mount of Olives. At his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. And what's going to happen? An earthquake. 10 kilometres to the north, that mountain's going to travel, and 50 or maybe 40 kilometres to the south. Split in two, brothers and sisters. That's what's going to happen. Here's the fault line that Zechariah describes. It says, all the land shall be turned as a plain, in verse 10, from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem. And it shall be lifted up. The it is Zion. Zion shall be lifted up and inhabited in her own place, from Benjamin's gate, under the place of the first gate, under the corner gate, and from the Tower of Hananiah under the king's wine presses. Now this is what's going to happen. Now, there's about approximately the difference between Geba and Rimmon, about 50 or 60 k's, brothers and sisters. Just imagine the mountain travelling, half a mountain travelling south for 40-odd k's and a half of it travelling, say, 10 or 20 k's to the north. Just imagine that. And how high is Mount Olivet? Just under 3,000 feet high, so it's just a bit higher than Mount Lofty. Imagine that split down the middle. Go and have a look one night and just look across. You can see it our way and you look across. Just imagine that coming straight down the middle and just disappearing in either direction. Your mind boggles as to how that will affect the earth. I well remember that many years ago, when I first came into the truth, there was a group of brothers and sisters in the Perth Central meeting. They took these details to a noted geologist. And they said to him, now look, they read him this chapter. They said, we don't think you're going to believe this, and we'd like you to, but we don't think you will. But just ignore that. We believe it. Tell us from your point of view, what will that do? What sort of effect they would have? He laughed at them. He said, there's nobody can tell you that. He said, we deal, he said, not with the movements of the earth in height. He said, but in width mostly. He said, but you're talking about a couple of 2,500 feet over in height. He said, we would talk about in those terms in inches. Just imagine, therefore, what that earthquake will do. And we'll see some of the references tonight as to what it will do. But what's going to happen here? Geba to Rimmon, right? And the record says, the whole turned into a plain. Now look at that. The whole of that land flattened in that area. Now think about the hills of Judea. And you go down through the Shephelah, and they gradually decrease in height, of course, until getting into the Maritime Plain, and it's relatively flat. But nearly all the way to the Maritime Plain is hilly. But here we've got a plain right around us. Just imagine, the earthquake comes, splits the mountain, Jerusalem's in the middle, and the land goes down into an absolute flat plain all around. You imagine, just imagine the genius of getting that done without making a mess of it. Whoever could plan the faults that are all there today that will react in that way? You see, we read this, on that day the waters shall flow out of half of them to the eastern sea and half of them to the western sea. And that'll continue in summer and winter. There'll be no end to that water, brothers and sisters. There'll be no end to that water. You know, it's interesting, the days of Hezekiah, he brought water, didn't he? From down on the edge of the valley of the Kidron, up near the temple area, he ran that underneath the wall and brought it down to the pool of Siloam, which in the Old Testament was the king's garden. All right, the king's garden. And when Rabshakeh come there, brothers and sisters, to capture that city, and all these arrogants stood outside hurling abuse at the people and running Hezekiah down and laughing at the God of Israel as if he could save their people. And that great general standing out there in all his pomp and glory, and Isaiah they petitioned Isaiah what they're going to do, and he sent them out there. The Hezekiah's henchman, he sent out there, brothers and sisters, to talk to this man, and go and tell him, he said, and stand up close to him and say, the daughter of Zion has despised you. The daughter of Zion have despised you. A little girl, unmarried as yet, but she's engaged to be married. And she stands there in front of Rabshakeh and says, despised you. This great burly figure, this champion of the cause for Nebuchadnezzar's crowd and so forth. So what's going to happen? Or not Nebuchadnezzar, it was the Assyrians, wasn't it? Shalmaneser's crowd. And there he stands there representing that king. And there's that little girl, not the little girl herself, but that's what they told her, answering, brothers and sisters. You know what the Song of Solomon said? It said, that when a man gets married, little girl, virgin, she marries a brother. That brother takes her into his house. And the Song of Solomon likens that to a man having a house with a well in there. And in the authorised version, where this is spoken of, it says, let thy waters be dispersed abroad. It's exactly the opposite in the Hebrew. It's exactly the opposite. It says, don't do that. You don't let that water run outside your own backyard. That's your water, because it represents your wife. And she's like a living influence in your life. You drink from her all the goodness that she can bring to you and the help she can give you in the truth. You don't share that around the other place. That's yours, it's in your garden. And the Hebrew there is dramatically different to what it says in the authorised version. You don't see, because that is yours. Well, what Hezekiah did, brothers and sisters, he brought the waters of the virgin fountain of Israel down to the king's garden. He brought that virgin stream down to the king's garden and enclosed it with a wall. That was his possession. And what he was telling Rabshakeh, You don't know what you're up to. You don't know what you're talking about. There's living water here. It represents our marriage. We're married to the divine. He is our supply. And he hid it from it, didn't he? It was all hid from him. It was outside. They could have had access to that. But he hid it. They didn't see it. And he brought that water down there to the king's garden. Go and tell him the virgin daughter of Zion's despised you. I would have liked to put all that up on the screen if I'd have thought about it. But you know, brothers and sisters, it's a marvellous figure. It is absolutely a marvellous figure. And that's part of the topographical changes. Now it says here, Zion, shall be lifted up. Now there's our map again. There's the indicated there. And of course, just before the Mount of Olives is the Valley of the Kidron. And then you see the Dome of the Rock, which of course was where the ancient temple stood. Now there's only about less than a half a kilometre from that temple over to the Garden of Gethsemane, just across the ditch there. Now imagine the effect of that earthquake, what it will do. How's it going to be lifted up? Now what it means by it is this. You see, we read in Psalm 48, this is of course the RSV, and the Hebrew's correct. Beautiful in elevation is the joy of all the earth, Mount Zion in the far north, the city of the great king. Now there's a compass up there, right? North, south, east and west. You can see where north is. Okay, well here's where Zion is. Zion doesn't exist. Zion is non-existent. But its name means conspicuous. Conspicuous. You can see it for miles. Well, there's one direction you wouldn't see it. It's from the north. But Psalm 48 says you will. Now, you could come from the east, you'd see it. You could come from the west, you'd see it. You could come from the south and you'd certainly see it. You would never see that if you come from the north until you got right down to the top of that ridge and you looked over the top and there it is. The only way you wouldn't see it was from the north. So what's going to happen? Now I think all of this happens within about a kilometre. You find this. The mountain goes that way and the hill goes that way. And all around, in about a 50-kilometre circumference or diameter, stands up like that and the rest of the land goes like that. It's conspicuous. Wouldn't matter where you come from now, you'd see it not only from the east, west and the south, you'd see it from the north. Everyone will see it. It'll stand out, brothers and sisters, like a lighthouse. And all of that, all of those topographical changes, brilliantly done within about a half a kilometre of the Garden of Gethsemane and the Mount of Olives. All done like that. Just like that. Now, you know, Paul says this to us at the present, just to illustrate the fact that Zion doesn't exist. Chapter 12, he said this, "For we are not come to the mountain that might be touched." The reason? It's not there. "And that burned with fire, nor with blackness and darkness and a tempest, the sound of a trumpet and the voice of words, which voice they that heard entreated that the word should not be spoken to them any more. For they could not endure that which commanded." Now notice what he says. "And if so much as a beast touch the mountain, it shall be stoned or thrust through with a dart." Now why would you throw a stone at it or spear the thing? Because it has touched the mountain. You must not touch it. See the emphasis that's being put upon that? Paul hadn't put that there just as a curiosity. He's trying to tell us the emphasis is that you could actually touch it. That even if a beast touched it, if you made personal contact with the beast, you had, by uniting with that animal, actually touched the mountain. It was possible. That's what he's trying to tell us. That law was given to show us that it was distinctly possible. And so terrible was the sight that Moses said, "I exceedingly fear and quake." But you're come to Mount Zion. And he doesn't need to put in brackets that can't be touched, because they all knew that. And to the city of the living God. the heavenly Jerusalem, and to the innumerable company of angels, to the general assembly and the ecclesia of firstborns which are written in heaven, and to God the judge of all, and to the spirits of just men made perfect. So you see, here in Hebrews 12, we've got the very reverse of what we're reading in Zechariah, because that will be a day when you certainly will be able to touch it. But here's proof that we can't today, except in our hearts. We're come unto Mount Zion. You know, I'll never forget, in 1969, when we were out on the Mount of Olives, directly opposite, of course, to that slope which goes down, and Zion's only a slope. And of course I knew, and we had a senior guide, he was about 37-year, I think, senior guide in the land of Israel, mastered in archaeology in England in 10 years in a London university and so forth. And I remember standing alongside of him, and he was a very knowledgeable man. And he was going to tell us about this, you see, but in the end he let me do it. But he was going to tell us about this Mount Zion. But so before he started, he said, he let me go, you see, and I told the brothers and sisters this story. Now, if I hadn't have said that, he thought he had these ordinary Christians who go there with a romantic view of the land, and they think, well, they'd want to see Mount Zion. They know they've got to be shown something imminent. They would point out that no, Zion's down the western end. It's on the southwestern corner, not the southeastern corner, where the elevation's higher, and where the tomb of David is. That's what they tell you. And I'll never forget standing there when I told the group that, and he's standing there like that, and just like this, and he's nodding his head, and he's saying, John is right, John is right. I'm not saying that to prove I'm right, by the way, just to tell you that he would have expected me to say something different. But we know better, brothers and sisters. We know that Zion doesn't exist. We know we can't touch it today. We'll touch it tomorrow. We'll touch it tomorrow. But today we touch the spirit of Zion, don't we? We touch all that it stands for. Everything that's conspicuous in our life, that's what it stands for, brothers and sisters. We touch that. But you are come unto Mount Zion. It's very conspicuous to us that we've got the truth. We touch this. We can handle that. There it is. And that book will become a reality, brothers and sisters. It'll just grow into a reality. And Zion we'll see from miles away in the day when Yahweh says, even from the north you'll be able to see it like that. But you can't do that today. And we're told, brothers and sisters, that in order for that to happen, there's got to be this earthquake. We learn about that in verse 4. Now here's the prophecy telling us about that. Isaiah chapter 2. For the day of, I love reading these verses. For the day of Yahweh of hosts shall be upon everyone that's proud and lofty. You see, Zion's going to be made conspicuous. And there's some people in this world that's going to be made very inconspicuous. Matter of fact, they're going to disappear. Upon everyone that's proud and lofty, upon every man that's lifted up, is going to be brought low. Upon all the cedars of Lebanon, which are high and lifted up, and all the oaks of Bashan, those big trees up in Lebanon, up there in Bashan, the oaks of Bashan, brothers and sisters, on the other side of Galilee, and upon all the high mountains, and upon the hills that are lifted up, all the big names in this world are going to come crashing to the ground. A couple of them went through our city not long ago. Prince Charlie and his wife Kate lived for 6 years together before they got married. That's what the world glorifies. Well, that's coming to the ground, brothers and sisters. That's coming flat to the ground. And all those pompous people around the world, the Idi Amins, all those sort of people, the Putins of this world, brothers and sisters, all the proud and the arrogant that filch the people, their own people, and crush their own people to make themselves grand and beautiful castles, are going to come right down flat on the ground. That's what that verse is telling us. This earthquake will be emblematic, brothers and sisters, of what Yahweh's going to do to people. It's going to be a devastation that's going to be glorious to see. And it's upon every high tower, upon every fenced wall, and it's upon the ships of Tarshish. And if ever you want to know what that means, It means all the merchants, all the big money men, all these fellas that's got millions of dollars, like Clive Palmer's going to build a replica of that boat that sank, the Titanic, as if anyone cared less about that. And they're very great for doing that. There are children starving to death by their thousands, brothers and sisters, all over this world while that goes on. Not by their thousands, by their tens of thousands, by their hundreds of thousands. Starving to death, little kids. While all this goes on, well, it's coming to an end. It's coming to an end. And upon all the pleasant pictures. And who hasn't been drawn in with pleasant pictures? Imagine the bonfire that Yahweh will make of all the magazines that are on the racks you see in newsagents. They're all going, brothers and sisters. The loftiness of man shall be bowed down, the haughtiness of men. Look at the emphasis in these verses. It's all about pride and arrogance and lust. Haughtiness of men shall be made low, and Yahweh alone shall be exalted in that day, and that'll be true, brothers and sisters, of all of us. I don't think there's any brother and sister here has any thoughts in their head of being great in the kingdom of God, so they'll be seen of men, that we wouldn't even entertain that thought, would we? I think sincerely say that. I think we could all sincerely. You and I will be exact happy as anything, brothers and sisters, to give the meanest spot in that kingdom. We sing about that in our hymn. We won't want any self-aggrandizement, because there's no way we could ever come anywhere near the man that will cause living water to run through the veins of our being, brothers and sisters. There's no man can do that. But they have done it. Yahweh alone is going to be exalted in that day, just him alone, and it'll be done, of course, through his Son. And the idols he shall utterly abolish. And what are they going to do? They're going to get the holes of the caves of the earth for the fear of Yahweh and for the glory of his majesty when he ariseth to shake terribly the earth. You know, there wouldn't be any of us who haven't either seen in pictures, newspapers, or newsreels, whatever, videos or whatever, haven't seen the buildings rock in an earthquake. I was back in 1954, one went through Adelaide, about 0.4 on the Richter scale. I fell out of bed. It was the middle of the night. I found myself flat on the ground. And I woke up with a start, jumped up. I'd only been a year in the truth. I ran to the windowsill and I held the windowsill, and it was like a train went through my house, went through the room. There was this noise coming like you'd swear it was a train gone off the rails coming through our house. And it went roaring through our house. That was just 0.4. That was just 4 on the Richter scale. 1954 that happened. Imagine, brothers and sisters, sometimes you've got an opportunity, you're in somewhere there's someone got a globe of the world, just pick it up and shake it in your hands. The whole world, just shake it in your hands. You can't imagine that, can you? Can't imagine it. In that day shall a man cast his idols of silver and his idols of gold, which they had made each one for himself to worship, to the moles and to the bats. They're going to go into the clefts and the rocks and the top of the ragged rocks for fear of Yahweh and for the glory of his majesty when he ariseth to shake terribly the earth. And the tremendous exhortation, brothers and sisters, when we've put our mind to work, imagining all of that and seeing it in our mind's eye, we turn around and Yahweh says, "Cease from man! Stop!" That's where he's going. That's what he can do for you. Right. Stop. Why put your trust in him? Cease from man. His breath's in his nostrils. What's he to be accounted of? Why should we worry about men? Why should we want to be somebody great, brothers and sisters? Why do we have these flamboyant ambitions? Why do we want to be roaring around everyone, spending our money on things we shouldn't be spending it? Why would we want to do that? Cease from man, says God. Because that's where it's all going to finish. Ezekiel, you know what Ezekiel says, it shall come to pass at the same time when Gog shall come against the land of Israel, saith the Lord Yahweh, that my fury shall come upon my face. For in my jealousy and in the fire of my wrath have I spoken. Surely in that day there shall be a great shaking in the land of Israel, so that the fishes of the sea, the fowls of the heaven, the beasts of the field, and all creeping things that creep upon the earth, and all men that are upon the face of the earth shall shake at my presence. Have you ever seen a bird shake at the presence of an earthquake? Well, God says the fowls of heaven are going to do that. Even the birds will notice a difference, brother. There'll be an eerie, dreadful feeling in the world. And he says, the mountains shall be strewn down and the steep places shall fall and every wall shall fall to the ground. Incredible picture, isn't it? Hard to imagine and comprehend. But that, brothers and sisters, is what Yahweh intends to do with this world. It is a safe place. There's one place safe. Jerusalem shall be safely inhabited, says Zechariah. Now here's Isaiah 33, verse 17 to 22 from the RSV. Now this is our vision, brothers and sisters. Let the world be terrified, but this is where we're heading. Your eyes will see the King in his beauty. You know, you want to drink in the... Don't ever read these things fast. Your eyes will see the King in his beauty. Have you ever thought in the quiet moments of your home, whether you sit in a chair sometimes when you're on your own, maybe wake up in the middle of the night or early in the morning, lean back on your pillow, I'm going to see Christ in his beauty. We haven't got any idea what he looks like. We've got the Christian idea of it, with long flowing blonde hair, which is very un-Jewish-like. We've got no idea. And we can't, brothers and sisters, have any idea of how, when we talk about beauty, it's not beauty as we understand it. Far supersedes that. His countenance, brothers and sisters, his demeanour, everything about him will just talk of absolute perfection. Do you know, when you read about the angels in the Bible, the most common expression, if you could say there is a common expression, but the most used one that I know of an appearance of an angel, is a young man in white. That's the most common expression. A young man in white. Someone who's got eternal youth and no blemish. Well, what will he look like? Your eyes, it says, will behold a land that stretches afar off. Not a land shaking. But the eye can hardly go far enough to see the horizons, stretching out ahead. This is your future. Birthdays will have no meaning. Years and days and months and time, minutes and seconds are gone. Eternity, brothers and sisters, forever and ever and ever and ever. Stretching way out. Just imagine that. Your mind will muse on the terror. Where is he who he counted? Where is he who weighed the tribute? Where is he who counted the towers? I don't see anybody here that's made millions out of others at their expense and lived luxuriously, careless of anyone else. I don't see him. Where is he? People who counted, weighed the tribute, counted their towers. They're not here. You will see no more insolent people. The people of an obscure speech which you can't comprehend, stammering in a tongue which you don't understand. Do you feel like that now when you're in the world? When you mix sometimes with the world, you go out, you go to some of these places, into a concourse of people, brothers and sisters, and you may be held up somewhere and everyone's jabbering around. You don't understand what they're talking about. If you do, well, I think you're in trouble. I don't think he's just talking about a people who talks a different language. They talk about different things. And some of us know a lot about what they're talking about, and we shouldn't. Because it's of no interest to us. I don't think that we'll beat England in the test match in the millennium. I don't think the Crows will go premiers in the millennium. I don't think any of that will happen. I don't think there's going to be big fashion houses where the saints can go and get dressed up to be better than one another. All of that's foreign to us. It'll be a world apart, brothers and sisters. And it's not as if it'll be apart just then. It's telling us what it ought to be now. And this is the thing. He says, you'll look upon Zion, the city of our appointed feast. There's we want to get together. There's where we want to eat. Your eyes shall see Jerusalem, a quiet habitation. Can you imagine it? You ever turn your radio on and the football comes on, you can't hear the commentator, there's a roar, it just about fills your house. You won't hear that in Zion. It'll be just a magnificent, peaceful quiet. No need for riots. We'll see that. Keep saying, don't they? Your eyes are going to see that. Yours. That's an encouragement, isn't it? It says, you will see Jerusalem, a quiet habitation, an immovable tent. An immovable tent. All tents are made to move. They put them up, sheets of canvas, there's ropes down and pegs in the ground. But you can pull the peg up, wrap up with the ropes, the canvas falls over and you fold it up and off you go. Nothing will move. This is permanent. This is for all time, brothers and sisters. There won't be any immovable tents whose stakes will never be plucked up nor any of its cords broken. But there, Yahweh in majesty will be a broad river and streams. So we're going to see these magnificent rivers going out into the desert. Imagine it. Imagine the Gibson Desert, the Simpson Desert, the Gobi Desert, the Sahara Desert. Name them one after the other. All those deserts, brothers and sisters, which covers thousands, hundreds of thousands of square kilometres. The whole country sometimes, all Australia, just populated around the edge and all the interior. Imagine these tremendous streams going out there, brothers and sisters. But there's something you won't see on that water. You won't see a galley with oars could go, where no galley with oars. You know what a galley with oars would think? Who do you think? A galley's not a little rowboat. A galley is a warship. And who pulls the oars? Slaves. Chained to their post. With a man with a lash walking around, keeping them going. You won't see that on the waters coming out of Zion or anywhere in the world. You won't see it. No stately ship will pass. Clive Palmer's Titanic will not be there. I'll guarantee you. You won't see Clive Palmer's Titanic. Won't appear. Why? For Yahweh is our judge. Yahweh is our ruler. And Yahweh is our king. He will save us. Never read those scriptures quickly. Don't just read them, brothers and sisters, drink them. Because that's telling us about what your eyes are going to see and my eyes are going to see. Dying to see that day, brothers and sisters. It'll be a lovely day. Now in verse 12, we've got this. And this shall be the plague wherewith Yahweh will smite the people that has fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet. Their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. Isn't that interesting? So people who come up against Jerusalem, brothers, they're going to cop a plague. Where are they going to cop it? Their flesh, brothers and sisters, their eyes, and their tongue. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life. That's where they're going to cop it. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life. That's where they're going to cop it. We all struggle with that every day of our life. It's a constant, ceaseless battle, isn't it? The instincts of our body, what our eyes see, and the boastings with our mouth are forever plaguing us, day by day by day. And the only difference, brothers and sisters, between us and the people of the world who go their own sweet way is that we really know it and we admit it and we know we do it and we're sorry for it. That's the only thing we've got going for us. But it doesn't stop. It's a daily struggle and it'll go on until we're buried. And Yahweh's coming, brothers and sisters, to bring a condition about the world that'll stop those mouths, it'll stop those eyes, and it'll stop that flesh to a very great degree. You know, Brother Carter, he had an interesting comment in his book on Zechariah about this section. And this was written some time ago, of course, but he says this: perhaps one of the most terrible things that happened to Israel was expressed in the divine decree, I gave them up to their own heart's lust. The possible use of chemical products of human ingenuity has led to the provision in 1939 of gas masks for the whole civilian population of Great Britain. Poison gases were used in the Great War of 1914-18 and in what are now the minor wars between the two world wars in Abyssinia and Spain. What modern discovery may yet reveal in these methods of human diabolism is not pleasant to contemplate. But the description of the prophet suggests that some such developments of poison gas and chemical warfare is indicated. Brother Carter, if he could hear us in the grave, Brother Carter, it's happening in Syria. It has come to pass, hasn't it? These diabolical methods. Now, whether Yahweh will use that or not, he doesn't need them, brothers and sisters. He doesn't need them, but he may let them. You see, every man's hand's going to turn against his neighbour, we're going to learn in a minute. What's he going to use? God's power? Certainly not. What's he going to use? He's going to use this diabolical method. You know, have you ever read a description of Hiroshima? There was one witness to it, you know, that wrote up about it at that time. A man was miles from the centre of where that bomb went off. And he describes vividly what happened when he saw this thing coming. This is what man can do. And he saw that aeroplane, Elon Gay or whatever his name called, fly over the top, and he saw this parachute coming down, and he watched it, and his description was, he said, next minute there was a blinding flash. This is miles away. There was a blinding flash, and he felt the heat going past him, tearing his face apart, tearing the flesh of his face from off his face and the rest of his body, till stripped him naked and stripped a lot of his flesh and blistered it away. He lived miraculously. That was his description. But Yahweh, brothers and sisters, doesn't need that power. But it might well be used when every man's hand turns against his neighbour. That certainly may happen. And then in verse 13 we read this: and it shall come to pass in that day there shall be a great tumult. The RSV says panic. From Yahweh shall be among them, and they shall lay hold every one on the hand of his neighbour, and his hand shall rise up against the hand of his neighbour. Now, that's not an uncommon occurrence, is it? There's a lot of biblical records about that. Here's a couple of cases, brothers and sisters. Examples of this, you got what? In Judges, Gideon's victory over the Midianites. They went down the valley of Jezreel beating down themselves. You got Saul's victory over the Philistines. The same thing happened. You got the 1st, 2nd of Chronicles, Joshua's victory over Edom, Ammon and Moab. Exactly the same thing happened. Jesus Christ's victory over the Russian Gog. That verse says, every man's hand shall turn against his brother. So you see, Yahweh has weapons of war, brothers and sisters, of his own, of course, in his own power, far greater than any hydrogen bomb, far, far greater. He doesn't need any of their weapons. But if they've got these diabolical means, they turn on each other. And that's what Zechariah says they will do. Then they'll go beating down each other, brothers and sisters, and they will be consumed. And then in verse 14 it says, and Judah shall fight. Which means, brothers and sisters, that the third that remains after the Holocaust, of course, of the Russian Gogic invasion, the third that are left will fight, brothers and sisters. The Jews will fight. At that point, they won't know who or what they're fighting for, but they'll soon find out. And then it says this in verse 14. And Judah shall also fight at Jerusalem, and the wealth of all the heathen round about shall be gathered together, gold and silver and apparel in great abundance. Now it's interesting. It says they'll be gathered together. The accumulated spoil of gold, brothers and sisters. He shall enter into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab, chief of the children of Ammon. That's on the other side Jordan. He shall stretch forth his hand upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, Zechariah says, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to make away many. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and nobody's going to help him. So he's just returned from Egypt, brothers and sisters, with the treasures, the precious things of Egypt. Did you know, many of you do, that there's been recent discoveries of immense deposits of gold in the sand of the Sahara at the edge of Egypt? They're saying it's not just a few nuggets. They're saying that they know that down there is an enormous treasure trove of gold in Egypt. Well, Gog's going to go there first, and he's going to come back with that, with all the treasures of gold. That's what Zechariah says. He shall come back with all that silver and gold, brothers and sisters, and apparel in great abundance. And he'll come back in a spirit of triumph, won't he? He won't come back from Egypt because he's frightened of this, what he's heard from the north and the east. He won't be worried about that. He'll think he'll deal with that easily because he's dealt with all the others on the way down. He's bypassed Jerusalem at the moment. He's left that for last. He'll come back there. That's where he wants to go. And when he hears that these are unusual things that are happening in the north and the east, and there's all sorts of rumours floating around of what's going on, and the intelligence reports are coming in that something extremely unusual is happening, he'll wonder what it is. But he's going to go back with his pockets full of silver and gold, isn't he? And he's going to go tearing back there, brothers and sisters, to utterly, in fury, to destroy and utterly to take away many. And he'll plant his tabernacle. He'll put down his authority in that place. He will have great success. 2/3 of those people, the Jewish people, will suffer. And he'll get right up, brothers and sisters, to the point where he will be able to eradicate the name of Jew out of the earth. Now, I didn't know this, but I'd like someone to check it. But I've been told just recently that the total population of the Jewish people worldwide is only about 8 million. I find that incredible. Think of that. I mean, Hitler got rid of about 6 million. There's about 7, I think, living in the land. I would have thought there's a whole lot more Jews than that. But if there is, there wouldn't be many more, would there? Imagine how close he gets to closing off God's purpose with the earth. Just like that nurse who hid that little baby boy from Athaliah, and she missed him. The last living remnant of David's seed could have gone like that. And 2/3 of the Jewish people in the land destroyed. What's left? 2 million? How much longer could they last, brothers and sisters? And at the death knock, 2 beautiful feet, the most beautiful feet that ever walked the earth, will touch all of it. Oh, can you imagine? An enormous earthquake. And yet, miraculously, those people in the land that are left shall be saved. 1/6 only of the Russian host will go back. 5/6 of that Russian host gone. Just 1/6 left. And a remnant of Jews. And Judah shall fight. The small remnant shall fight. And that, brothers and sisters, will bring the Son of God into the world, won't it? That will be the critical factor. And as I said at the beginning of this talk, that is starting to happen now. I think we can confidently say that in the next weeks or months or even days or hours, brothers and sisters, we will see a growing resentment more than ever we've seen against Israel. We will see Israel intransigent about that peace talk. They won't give an inch. I don't think they will. And we will see the world isolate them. One by one, the nations will isolate them until His Holiness the Pope or someone will make a suggestion. It's expedient that that people should go. And they'll come right to the very edge of victory when the name of Israel will be wiped off the face of the earth and the Son of God will come. That, brothers and sisters, is a day worth waiting for, and it's worth living for.